Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us again today. I'm excited to be here for another. This is the launch of our season for 2023, and joining me today is Bonnie Buol Ruszczyk, and it took me a few times to get that right. And Bonnie, you said something funny to me recently when we were talking that had to do with vowels, looking at your name, but maybe you could use a few of those.
Yes.
So that was funny. And I appreciated that. Bonnie is the owner of BBR Companies. She's a marketing consultant and works largely with accounting firms that don't have or can't afford a full-time marketing person. She's also a DEI consultant and the new owner of the Move Project. We met recently when we were collaborating on D&I material for the CPA Consultants Alliance. And when I learned she was the owner of the Move Report, I immediately asked her to join us. I'm very passionate. I was involved in that project many years ago. So Bonnie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'm going to kick this off with my first question, which is especially, taking over ownership of the Move Report. That's a big project. Is there passion? What's calling you behind that?
I have been aware of the Accounting Me Project for a long time, and am passionate about working in the DEI space and helping accounting firms create cultures that are going to be appreciated and appealing to people of all walks of life. And Joanne, the founder, Joanne Cleaver, the founder of the Move Project, approached me last February about taking it over. And after a little bit of thought, I decided that this was something I really wanted to pursue to, further my work with firms and, create opportunities and share resources and best practices with them on, how to create a culture where women and also other underrepresented groups can really thrive and succeed and will want to stay, especially in this day and age of talent shortage. So I'm very excited about it. I did work through the project last year. I was able to shadow Joanne and her team, and this year she is shadowing me and my team. So we're very excited to get it kicked off here in about a month.
So for those who don't know, can you tell us what it is? It's not a port, it's a project, or is it both?
All of the above and more. So the Accounting Move Project is, we sort of live in the same space as some of the best places to work lists, at least partially, in that we do create a list of best CPA firms for women and best CPA firms for equity leadership every year. And part of that process is a big clunky survey that all these different groups use. But I think where we stand apart is that we also interview. We have both qualitative and quantitative report information in our report. So we interview every firm that participates. We dig into the 4 move factors, which are money, opportunity, vital supports, and entrepreneurship. And then we also have a theme every year that we see what's going on in the marketplace, have nice conversations with our sponsors, and kind of determine what we're really going to dig into for the next year. And additionally, every firm that participates gets either a snapshot or a scorecard, and the real difference in those is the length and depth of information, which talks about areas where they should celebrate, where they're really doing a great job and they're succeeding. And then we also talk about areas where they should concentrate. So, including things where they're, faltering in different processes or things like that. So, and then in those concentrate areas, we're able to show best practices that we learn from other participating firms and just things that we know is going on in the marketplace. Also, finally, I think we create a really comprehensive report on what we learned that year and release it publicly. It is available to anybody, and share that information and wind up being quoted in a lot of press and get a decent amount of coverage on that, because it is sort of the only report of its kind in the market.
I had the honor and the privilege to work with Joanne back when I was at Grant Thornton, and I can vouch, having worked in the development of the survey and deploying it and then pulling back that data, it is a Herculean effort. And so hats off to you for taking this on. This is such important information. And I want to dig into a little bit more about how the data can be used. But first, I think we should launch our first polling question, because I think the answer to that can help guide our conversation.
All right, with that, we have come to our first poll of the day. This is the first of 4 polls. And to respond to these polls, you'll click the radio button that corresponds to your answer, and be sure to click submit to register your response for credit. Let us know if you're currently measuring pay equity in your firm or company. We'll leave this open for another 30 seconds.
Meanwhile, I'm in the back end here setting my timers because I forgot to start it. What you don't want to do is go long on a webinar, right, folks?
I'll keep
on a Friday afternoon, no less.
Friday afternoon. Even though it's fascinating, Bonnie, right? Fascinating.
That's right. It's a good way to end the week.
I'll also apologize in advance. I made an amateur mistake. My dog is still in the room and he snores badly. So I really apologize if that comes through. I'm going to try to mute.
Special effects. I'll go ahead and shut down this first poll in 3, 2, 1. 37% of you are not sure. 29% are saying no. 24 proudly yes. Back to you, ladies.
So Bonnie, when you look at those results, and one of the pieces of the MOVE report really is around pay equity, because you spend, and I think for many years it prioritized looking at gender and the demographics of gender. How does this report help organizations that are looking at that specifically as part of their D&I strategies?
Specifically, you're correct. Pay equity is really what we look at under the M of money. And we really don't care what firms are paying their people. We just want to know that they can prove that they're paying men and women equitably for comparable work. So we ask a number of questions around this in the survey, and actually when we talk to firms as well, so that we can, one, find out how many firms are measuring pay equity, how they're doing that, what they're doing to, when they discover an inequity, what they're doing to correct that, and how they're managing that within their firms. And then we can share that with others that are just getting started looking at that, or just have no idea where to start. And this has always been a part of the MOVE project since it started in 2010, but it's become much more important now that a number of states have actually passed laws about pay transparency and pay equity, and it's a question frequently on RFPs, particularly government ones. So we're proud that we've been doing this a long time and have some resources and information that we can share with firms on how to get started or how to improve their processes.
I want to remind folks to please put your questions in as we go along. We reserve time at the end, but I always love when we see the questions coming in, because then we can organize our conversation around that.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned we've been doing this since 2010, the MOVE project team. Are all of those reports available? Can I go back, and am I stuck to just the first one, or can I see everything?
You can see everything. At accountingmoveproject.com, there's an archives page, and we break out the information by year. So you can see the themes that we discussed. You can see the full reports every year. We also include the press releases, which list the best CPA firms for women and best CPA firms for equity leadership as well. So I heard from somebody recently that was looking for to join a CPA firm, moving surprisingly from industry to public, which doesn't happen all that often. And she said she was actually going through the press releases to see which firms had been on the list, and was focusing on those firms, since remote work allows people to really work for a firm located in any location.
That's fascinating. I will have to put that on my list of things to mention to my clients, because a lot of times we talk about recruiting. In our work, there's a lot of effort put into, or concern around, recruiting diverse talent. And one of the things I think organizations and firms are starting to recognize is, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Going to things like Glassdoor and Accounting Going Concern and some other sites where people say, Reddit, don't forget Reddit, where people talk about their current experiences. And even there's an app, I think it's called Fishbowl. Is that the app?
I'm not sure.
But being aware that showing up and being participating in a survey like this, it actually says a lot that you are even participating. So it's really interesting. But I don't want to spend a ton of time. I think one of the things I'm hoping this session helps people realize is that there are research reports out here, and the data is very, very helpful. So for example, let me pull up one of the slides that you shared. So here, you're comparing the data that helps people see the numbers behind what they perceive to be trends. But now you can actually see the numbers, you can measure the success.
Yes. And this one I think is particularly interesting, in part because it shows that at least firms that are participating in the MOVE project, women are being retained better in that transition from senior manager to partner or principal. 7 years ago, MOVE firms were similar to firms around the country. The AICPA results and the MOVE results were very similar, where firms are losing, half of their women in that transition. But now MOVE firms are losing around a third, which is still not great, but that's a big jump from before the pandemic. And one of the reasons why a third, you'll hear that a lot and see that a lot in our reports, is that it's an important milestone, because when any group comprises at least a third of a larger group, the members of that group are generally taken seriously on their own merits and not as representatives of a minority group. So, at a third, women are being heard a lot more and on their own merits for what they're saying.
I actually went back and was curious about the results in the MOVE report compared to the AICPA Trends report. The Trends report is every other year. The last one that came out was in 2020. So this is more current data. And you're going to have more data again based on this year's survey, which I think is important, because what you just said, when I went back and looked at this, first of all, women and men are entering the profession almost evenly. And in fact, I think it was trending 51% women recently. And that's important because only, it's about 50-50 in terms of people hired, but professional staff are only 44% female, partners 39% female. And so what you're showing here is we've seen progress since 2020. And so is that what I didn't go back, I'll be honest, I didn't go back and start to look at the trends from the prior MOVE reports. So is that where you're seeing us headed in the next, cross our fingers, the next year or two?
I think so. I see, firms there's a whole lot of factors contributing to this. In part, a lot of firms are really taking an active approach at making sure that their hiring practices are fair, that they are, creating a culture where people feel like they belong, and not just, the majority that work at the firm. And we're dealing with a huge shortage of talent. So there's we should do this because it's the right thing to do. And also there's the whole, we should do this because we really need people and they're not coming from the traditional places. So I do see this as a trend. Hopefully trends tend to, there's little ups and downs, but I feel like hopefully we've kind of passed that 50% of women leave firms at at senior manager level and never become partners. I hope we will continue to see some equity in that.
So when you're asking people to participate in the survey, are you developing best practices or recommendations based on the survey? Because I know I've seen in the reports where you're offering suggestions. If I remember correctly, like what can we do to help women based on what the data is telling us?
We definitely do create best practices based on the firms that we talk to and those that participate. And a lot of, I can't tell you the Google alerts that I have set up for things like women in workplace and pay equity and things. So I'm always reading about this topic. But yeah, the goal is not just to help improve firms that are participating, but hopefully improve practices for the profession as a whole.
What size firm do you think would benefit? Do you have to be big? And by big, I think, maybe 500 or higher. Does it benefit a firm with 200 people to do this?
Yes, I went back and looked at the size of firms that participated last year, and the largest is somewhere around 4,000 employees. The smallest was around 70.
Wow.
So we have firms of all sizes participating. Now, if you're a firm with 3 partners, it's probably not as beneficial, though I still think, there's value in getting the information about, the pay equity and everything else. But, certainly we have a couple of firms and hope to add more that are less than 100 people.
So this most interesting question just came in, and I think it's really important to maybe address it now. Eric asks, can you please explain the difference between equity and equal opportunity? That is a great question.
Yes. Do you want to take this one, Janelle, or do you want to work on it
I'm
together?
happy to. I don't know if you want to answer it. So equity,
yeah.
The concept of equity versus equal is where people can get a little bit confused. Equity is really around ensuring, lack of a better word, I'll say fairness, that different groups are getting the supports and the resources that they need. So equality is everybody's getting the same thing. And that's not necessarily the case. So for example, when we talk about pay equity, especially as it relates to gender, we're not saying that every woman in the same title as every man should have the same pay, because there are a lot of factors that come into that. But what we're saying, though, is that you said it earlier, equal pay for equal work. So you're going to have different types of experiences. You're going to have different roles. There might be a woman, for example, who was leading a department of 20 people versus a woman leading a department of 2 people, even though they're at the same level, which means they might be bringing different skills and abilities to an organization. Their pay should be commensurate with those, commensurate, that's not the right word, relative to those roles and comparable to men were they in those same positions. So when we talk about equity, that's what we mean, as opposed to everybody should get the same thing.
Right. And that goes to resources as well. So you think about, somebody with a disability that needs something to help them, let's say somebody that's blind. They need an additional tool to help them gather information from their computers, the website. Handing that same tool out to everybody in the firm is a complete waste of time, energy, and money. But it allows that particular person to have what they need to do the job.
Right.
And
I liken it to, and I say this, but I don't know that it always sticks because I find pictures are helpful, but it's ensuring that everybody has what they need so that we all have the same chance to do the work. So, and some of us are disadvantaged in different ways. So I just think that hopefully, Eric, that helped answer your question. I actually have next week Norma Marquez Barjona, I think is how you say her last name. She has a tool that specifically does the data analytics around pay equity. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more next week. But I think understanding that there are reports like the MOVE report that collect this data every year. It's one thing to look inside your organization at pay equity, and don't get me wrong, this is important. I recommend all organizations to do this. But taken out of context, the MOVE report, correct me if I'm wrong, helps me have some context. And it's almost like a benchmark around where other firms are in the organization. In the profession.
Yes, absolutely. And that's our goal. So we're looking at the best practices of what firms are doing and sharing that with the profession as a whole. And I did want to make one little point on the pay equity thing that I think kind of does play into the equity conversation, is that one of the things that we uncovered in the 2022 report is that 78% of firms, there you go, are now having HR or firm administration review managers' pay decisions. And on the surface, that sounds like,
say that again. They're having managers review HR?
Nope. HR is reviewing managers' pay decisions.
I heard it backwards.
Yep. And the reason why that's, we feel, a good thing is that, a lot of times, especially in larger firms, different people are hiring for different roles and offering pay that may or may not be equitable throughout the firm. So HR is taking a look now in 78% of those firms at those pay decisions and saying, okay, you know what, this person came in and we're offering them lower than we typically do somebody in that role. And the hiring manager may not even have that information at hand, but we want to make sure that, people are coming in with fair pay. So, a whole big shifts don't have to happen down the road, and it's something that's being managed from the start and through the whole process.
So while we have this slide up here, can you speak to what you mean by what this does, how this report looks at race? I know that it hasn't historically included race in the report publicly, but that data has been collected for years, and it started to be analyzed and reported probably, 7-8 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I don't know exactly how many years ago. I'd have to go back and look at that myself. But that's, as, things change, and we want to have as much information as possible. So there are now questions on there about, not just women, but women, Black women, Asian women, Latino women, and trying to look at the racial makeup of firms as well as the gender makeup of firms. And with that information, you can also dig deeper on pay equity, opportunities. We did a decent amount of talking about employee resource groups this year. So how are they being formed and how are they contributing to the sense of belonging within firms? And I plan over the next years, I'm not making any crazy changes right now because I'm still learning the process. But, I really do want to dig deeper into some of these other underrepresented groups. So that, of course, includes race. It's more difficult, but can we dig into LGBTQ employees? And, are they being promoted, and do they have the same sense of belonging that others do within firms? There's so much to look at. And, we do report the racial makeup of the women within firms, or we did start doing that not long ago, but really plan to hopefully dig even deeper into that in coming years.
I was going to actually ask about that. Before we do, I think before we get yelled at, we should probably run a polling question. Jasmine, I'd like to actually jump to the third question if we could.
Right, so that's the question. Had you heard about the MOVE project? That's the one
Yes.
yep, got it, just making sure. All right, so that's our second poll up on everyone's screen now. Thank you all for voting in so quickly. I'll leave this open for about a minute.
It's funny, when I said that, I looked down and somebody had just asked that in the Q&A. I mean, I know I'm trying to monitor the time. I don't know that we have enough time to answer this. So if we need to pause, Jasmine, let us know. But you got me thinking about the intersection between race and gender. Actually, let's hold for when we come back. I'll plant the seed now. And how I might be able to understand that a little bit better, especially as it relates to pay equity or just inclusion and belonging, as you were mentioned. But I can see the polls closing here shortly, so give you a moment to think about that one.
All right.
By the way, Kathy says, "Where have I been? I've never heard of this before. It's amazing."
Yeah, lots of folks, it looks like, on this call, vast majority have not heard of it before today. So turning it back over to you.
So well, this is definitely my job to get you to hear about it.
Yeah, this is exciting. And don't forget, folks, on the handout, you have Bonnie's contact information. It's right here. Let me go back. On this slide, you'll notice that at the bottom, you have her email, her website. You can reach out to her on LinkedIn. And then at the very end of the PowerPoint presentation slides, you have this that has the same information that you need. And this is really important. All right, I'm jumping ahead here. This is important because firms might want to get involved. And so, but I want to come back to, all right, now I've got another question.
Let me add one thing to that real quick, and we can go back to the question. If you do want to be involved and participate, I mean, we have everything on the website, so feel free to go and spend as much time as you want to there. But we are going to start opening 2023 in March. So, you know, feel free to reach out to me, email me, whatever. I can put you on a list, and we'll send you the information when we do launch, and you can decide at that point if you do want to participate this year. But yes, time is a little bit of the essence. So definitely reach out and let me know what questions you have.
And and then after that, I promise we'll get back to the gender intersectionality question. But if they participate, how long are they involved? Like if it opens in March, is this a 6-month process, a 6-week process for them?
How long of a process it is for me versus them is a totally different story.
My organization, how much time are we going to need to invest to do this?
It actually isn't an enormous amount of time. We will, if you do want to participate, we would, send you the survey, which is comprehensive. So, I'm not going to lie to you there. It is not something you're going to knock out in 10 minutes.
I can attest.
But yeah, there's reasons for that. And so you fill out the survey, and then me or somebody on my team would reach out to you to schedule an interview. Sometimes we talk for an hour. Sometimes we talk to different people for an hour. It's not, we're not spending days and days in conversation, but we do want to talk to the right people and ask the right questions. So whatever time that takes is what we will take. Yeah. And then, we gather the information, we put together the reports. Reports for firms are completely confidential. So we are not sharing, any of your information publicly unless we ask you and you approve it. So we do include, best practices from firms in our final report, but every single thing you see in there has been reviewed and approved by the firm before it goes public. So really and truly, you're probably looking at, and the reports come out in October. The release of the information is around the Accounting and Financial Women's Alliance Women Who Count conference, which is generally the last week of October. So really, it's I would say maybe 6 to 8 hours tops, and that might be actually aiming high.
All right, I'll come back to a question on that. So I want to go back to the other question about the intersection between gender and race, because you specifically mentioned it. It was on this slide here where you analyze pay by race or gender. Is there ever an and race and gender sort of triangulated together, or does that data sit there so that organizations can do it with the information they've been given, as well as information that's available in the report publicly?
Yes, there are some firms that analyze by both race and gender. And those are the firms that we really want to talk to find out, okay, how are you doing that and what results are you getting from that so that we can kind of gather that as best practices. We haven't had a huge amount of data on that yet. So, what exactly firms are doing, we're not quite as sure. We did talk about it a little bit in the report, but that's something that we strongly encourage, and we are seeing more firms doing that.
And then just a quick nod, because I know not everybody on this webinar is in an accounting firm. So first I'll say there are a lot of research tools and white papers that are available for all industries. Is there anything that you can think of? Sorry, I might be putting you on the spot, in which case, reach out to one of us after the fact if you have that question. Is there a way that somebody in business and industry could use the report?
Well, I think there's some good best practices for any business in there, in ways that you're creating equitable opportunities for people within your business. What are some of the vital supports that are being provided by these firms? There was a whole case study on sabbaticals in the last one. And we were talking about how SAPRO in particular is providing the opportunity for their employees to take up to 3-month sabbatical during off season, obviously, but with no reason and at no tenure level. So you don't have to say, I'm going to go and plant trees and wherever or something like that. Sometimes people just want to take time off and don't feel like they want to share with their boss while they're doing it. And they're doing that, just to make sure I tell the whole story there, they are providing half they're half pay and full benefits for up to 3 months for anybody within the firm that wants to do it. So, all businesses could definitely be looking at sabbaticals as a way to help with burnout.
It's interesting because we often think about CPA firms as this special anomaly when they're business enterprises who need to be thinking about best practices for employees. The whole hybrid model. I was just reading another article today about the challenges of the increasing pressures for employees to come into the office. So this is no different than any other business. So for that, there should be some value here. I want to quickly walk through. So you had money, opportunity, vital support, and entrepreneurship. And you talked a little bit about the money. I have this back up again, the money piece. Can we look at, where is it? Opportunity. So how, when you talk about opportunity, what are the types of data points that you're collecting and then helping provide insight on?
A lot of the opportunity questions are around employee development, opportunities to create your own career or your own path. And this year, one of the things that we really uncovered was how much impact coaching is having on employees within firms. So, 83% of new firms were offering coaching from external resources. That's a pretty high percentage. And, there's all kinds of, you can Google benefits of coaching out there and read for the rest of your life. But what this is doing is, firms are investing in their people and giving them the skills that they need to succeed and to move through the ranks in the firm. And 87% were offering it for the transition from staff to manager, which is an area we looked at in particular. So I thought that was helping people have the skills and the knowledge and just be prepared for what's going to be required of them at the next level of their job seems like something that's certainly well worth investing in. I mean, I've been working with accounting firms for 15 years, and I can't tell you how many people that I've talked to, being that I'm in marketing too, and they're like, oh, I'm getting promoted to partner, and then all these things that they suddenly now have to do, including business development, is on their plate, and they have no idea how to do it. So I think that's really important.
I'm listening. I have like a dashboard of things here, and I quickly went to look at the actual move report, and you have on the slide here 87% of firms offering career coaching. What they don't see here, but as part of the report, is that's an all-time high. And so it's true that we're starting to see a lot of things change for women in the profession and women in business and industry. Period. We know that the impact on COVID on women was disproportionate. There were more women leaving the workforce as a result of the pressures and the difficulties imposed on them, limitations on their careers, disproportionate burden for maybe caretaking. But the bright side of that is we're starting to see women come back into the workforce at a higher rate. So it's positive, and I think reports like this can be especially useful as organizations think, okay, so what can we be doing differently to support these women as they come back into the workplace, or to have them move up the ranks, so to speak. I went back and looked at the trends report. Again, it's dated 2020. But I was excited to see that the number of women who are partners has increased, and we're going to see more of that moving forward through some of this work. So I'm excited, and I think that there's really great value. The fact that your report is showing not just the statistics, but how those numbers have, okay, no pun intended, but I was going to say how those numbers have moved. Nobody paid me to do that. It just was going to come out just like that. Over the years, valuable information. Folks, I didn't forget, there's 2 more polling questions, and I know they're there, so we'll get to them here in a minute. Somebody, I don't know if this is a question or comment, and whether it's for you or me, but let me read it. As the races have started to become more mixed over the years, has it gotten more difficult with racial statistics? And then same for gender being more fluid, and it's made it more difficult for those statistics too. So it might be too soon to know trend-wise, but have you seen firms having conversations about this, or just as a D&I consultant, does this bring up any thoughts or I don't know what to say about that, like perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the categories expand where, you pick white, black, Asian, whatever it might be. I've certainly seen the multiple races, options. So you can, because, and I kind of, in a way, sort of hate the idea of like, oh, we have to fit in this box, because none of us fit in a box. Let's just be honest there. But yeah, I've seen that going on, and I expect that will probably continue. How that's impacted measuring and statistics, I'm not quite sure yet, and I don't think we know yet.
Yeah. Does the move report ask or collect the data? When you ask for race, is it one, or is it check all that apply, or is it simply like more than one? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do not know. I would need to go back and look at that survey. It's been a minute since I've been in there.
The other comment I would make to that is one of the most interesting things that came out of, for me, when looking at some of the census data from the last census to this one, is the significant increase in the people who identified as multiracial. And when you look at the increase, but then you look at the population change, what we know is it was a question of identity. So people's racial identity is starting to shift, how they see themselves. it didn't mean the actual racial composition changed at the same rate. And so that could be creating some of the confusion maybe that Eric was bringing up, but that these trends are going to be hard, but we also know that the diversity demographics vary widely. They change widely by generation, even by decade. So people in their 60s and 70s are less diverse than people in their 20s. And that is just the case. And so I'd be curious to see how all of this is going to, play out in the next 10 years. So, but I will say that this is where we are. And then the other thing I would add is that for the LGBTQ plus community, you mentioned this earlier, it's still difficult to collect that information because unlike race and gender, which for large organizations, there's an annual report that they have to file with the government. So they're collecting that data, anonymized, of course. LGBTQ identity is entirely voluntary. And so there are a number of reasons that people won't share that information. All right, so we talked about M, we talked about leadership, which was O. What about this E thing? I think this is a big topic. Oh, wait, before we do this, let's go to the third
polling question,
which would be the second one now, Jasmine.
All right, got you covered. Went ahead and launched that third poll. Let us know if you're interested in getting more information about how your firm can participate in 2023. Go ahead and cast your vote now. Let us know if you're interested, and then we'll get right back into this thought-provoking conversation.
It's funny, Bonnie. You already talked about this, but I wrote down here. It's not just about participating. What are some of the other benefits? Is the big benefit that I'm going to get data about my firm that I otherwise wouldn't get without going out and hiring a consultant to do it at significant cost?
Yes. Not only data about your firm, but recommendations based on the conversations that we have with the people within your firm. And so, like I say, anything that's shared in the public report has been, approved by the participating firms. But there are some things that, they do not necessarily want to share publicly, and that's fair and understandable. What we do, the individual reports we create are, again, there's two different sizes of report that you can get. One's cheaper than the other. But it provides specific ways that you can make improvements, that you can maybe look at something a different way, and really is that can go to your firm administration, HR, and they can put those things into practice right away if they want to.
So I think what's interesting is looking at the entrepreneurship and business development piece. You talked about how women, we're seeing wonderfully more flexible work arrangements, flexible schedules, and now we have this pipeline to partnership where the partnership models are changing. And so some of the data that you're collecting is help seeing that trend and then offering organizations insight to learn where can they help women, what are some training programs that we can offer, what are some other supports that we can put into place so they are successful when they get into these roles. Am I correct? I think I've read some of that in the report.
Yes, and just say to follow on that whole business development side of thing and partnership, one of the things we're really planning to dig into this year is the idea of a customized or scaled partnership model. So, which is hugely popular, frankly, not just with women, but with men as well, in that, you have these requirements to be partner, but what we're finding is there's a number of people, particularly Gen X, younger Gen X, and then go back to millennials and Gen Z, that look at the hours that have to be worked in a partnership role, and they're like, I don't really want a part of that.
Right.
So, but what happens is you lose these people and they go to industry or something else. You lose all that institutional knowledge and leadership and opportunity. So there are a number of firms that are putting together kind of much more customized partnership opportunities that, of course, everything gets shifted. But we really plan to dig into that and see what it is that firms are doing so we can share that in the report this year. I'm excited about that.
I think that that's going to be very insightful because of what we know to be the trends happening, but no data behind those trends. So this is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm looking at the time. We have probably about 7 minutes or so. And so I just want to see if we can't quickly knock out some of the questions. I already answered the question Amber asked about where's their value as a member, not a member of an accounting firm. And I think we talked about just best practices in there that are appropriate for all businesses. Oh, this is another question. Is the MOVE report just for accounting firms? So we answered that. Somebody asked, what is a business plan competition? I don't know if you have a quick answer for that one, because there's a whole thing there.
Yeah, that was one of the things that came out in last year is that a lot of firms are investing in their communities in different ways. So one of the things that came out was there are a lot of firms that are doing internal or external business plan competitions. So, the one that I'll just share as an example is there's a firm that we talked to that is doing an internal Shark Tank. So people within the firm bring their ideas for expanding services, offerings, industries to go after, and present it to the partners who are the sharks. And the winning one, that one that has the most potential, not only gets a cash prize of some sort, but the firm commits to give them the resources they need to try and get that off the ground. Yeah. That is such a cool thing to me, because the ideas that have to come to them are pretty amazing, but people wouldn't have that opportunity in a traditional setting.
Not just have the opportunity, but if our history has been, and the data shows that women haven't always been empowered and their voices haven't always been heard, this is a fantastic way to create a safe way for people to bring forward a solution to the firm that either there's not a vehicle to do it, or they've never felt invited to do it. So I love that idea. So thank you for asking that question. Somebody else asked, could you comment on how trans folks, I just read the question, fit into the DEI model? I think that's more about, the LGBTQ community and diversity and inclusion. It's a little bit off topic, but I don't know if you want to take that or do you want me to address it?
Yeah, I can say that there are specifically no questions about the percentage of trans people that work within a firm. We just let people identify how they identify, and but that may be something that we want to look at or consider down the road.
I think the challenge there is back to it's entirely voluntary. And I think another point I'll add to that is just in terms of D&I more broadly, understanding how different groups are impacted or the barriers that they struggle with or the experience they have working in an organization. A lot of that work is part of D&I. In that case, it's what you mentioned earlier, it's inclusion and belonging. The data is important to understand the demographics, the trends, the implications in your groups, in your firms, the policies, etc. But then thinking about the experiences of working in those organizations is the inclusion piece. And I think understanding the trans identity is important, is an important part of that dialogue. I'm not going to ask that question because it feels political. Sorry, Michael. But you're welcome to reach out to us after the fact, and I'm happy to have a conversation. This next question, and this will be our last question. I'm a senior at my firm, and I'm always interested in increasing D&I efforts. What's the best advice you have for lower level staff to increase D&I efforts around me? Could they use this report as a segue into maybe conversations in their firm?
Yes, they absolutely could, and I know of a couple that have. Because what this is some hard and fast numbers on the racial gender makeup of your firm. It also, the report that your firm would get will actually make recommendations. A lot of them around D&I and things to do. And then I know I am more than happy to talk to anybody about recommendations, and I'm sure you are too as well, John. But yeah, this is a great way to kind of open the door and say, hey, this is how we're reporting, and it may be great. You may find out that you're doing fantastic, or you may find out that there are some areas you may want to focus on and may want to focus on first as you kick off a D&I program.
And I'll piggyback on that and say that raising your hand in your organization, bringing something like the MOVE report and saying, hey, I've been reading more about this. What are we doing? And more importantly, how can I get involved? That's a great way to demonstrate your interest in and being a part of leading, if I may go so far, these efforts. So I'll do a quick wrap up here and just remind everybody that on the slides, we have the contact information for Bonnie. If you want to learn more about the project, look at the archives, give her an email, give her a call to participate and learn more about it. There wasn't a lot of time to talk about that here. Next week, I have Norma Marquez Barahona. We're going to be talking specifically about all of the nuances of pay equity and some of the implications of that and some of the challenges of the analytics. And then I have here, this is again part of your handout, there's a whole series that I have already teed up. After Norma, we're going to be looking at and better understanding Indigenous and Native American culture, and then looking at the military experience, especially as veterans transition into the workplace. So Bonnie, thank you for joining me. We probably could have talked for 2 hours. I hope this information has been helpful.
Easily.
And I will say we'll launch that last polling question, and while it's open, maybe if you have a couple of last thoughts you want to share while that's open.
Sure.
So
Jasmine, do you need...
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I would say, feel free to read through the report. I would love to hear any feedback that you have, any thoughts that you have. And if you're interested in participating, we are welcoming new firms because frankly, the more firms that participate, the better the information is all overall. So we are looking for firms of all sizes, client accounting services firms, more traditional tax firms, could even, anybody that wants to, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. And hopefully, even if you're not an accounting firm, feel free to download the report, read through it, see if there's some nuggets that you can take to your company that you can use to bring up ideas or, make it a workplace that is more equitable for everybody.
It's interesting that there's so much data and there's so many sources for data. This is another area that you can collect just trends and layer it into whatever work you're doing, even if you're not in public accounting. So I'm a fan of the report and would encourage folks to download it. The more data, the better. Participate. The more data, the better. It helps all of us. So thank you. Thank you. And then the last thing I'll say here is that I mentioned that Bonnie's contact information is there. Mine is always there, every presentation. If you had a follow-up question you didn't get a chance to ask, reach out to either one of us. Our contact information is there, and you can find us everywhere. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook company pages, websites, and so on. And so thank you for joining me. I think, Jasmine, we're going to send it back to you to close us out.